When I came back from the hospital, I expected hugs, maybe a welcome home, Mom. But instead, the first thing that caught my eye was a brand new fridge, taller, shinier, standing right next to mine like it was challenging me. For a second, I thought I was imagining it. My head was still heavy from the medication, and my body ached from the surgery. But no, there it was, a second fridge humming loudly, cold and proud. "Whose fridge is that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. My son Daniel barely looked up from his phone. "That fridge? It's mine. You don't touch it." For a moment, I just stared at him. My son, the boy I raised alone after his father died. I smiled weakly, hoping it was a joke. "Yours? Since when do you need your own fridge?" He shrugged. "We need space. We?" I repeated softly. His wife Claire appeared from the hallway, arms crossed, eyes sharp. "We've decided to keep our food separate," she said. "You know, boundaries. That word, boundaries, stung more than any wound." I looked around the kitchen. The floor hadn't been mopped, dishes piled high. The curtains looked dusty. My cozy, warm kitchen felt like a stranger's house now. I tried to open my old fridge, the one that had stood here for years, but it was nearly empty. The groceries I'd bought before my hospital stay were gone. "Where's the chicken I froze last month?" I asked. Claire smiled without looking at me. "Oh, it was expired. We threw it out." "Expired?" I whispered. "It wasn't even 2 weeks old," she shrugged. "You were gone a while. Things happen." I stood there, clutching the edge of the counter to steady myself. My son didn't look at me. He just scrolled through his phone, nodding slightly to himself, as if this wasn't his home anymore, as if I was the one intruding. I wanted to believe I was overreacting. Maybe they'd just been overwhelmed while I was gone. Maybe they were stressed. But when I opened the new fridge, my heart sank even lower. It was packed, perfectly organized, filled with imported cheeses, wines, and neatly labeled containers. Expensive food, things I'd never seen them buy before. Then I looked back at my old fridge. Only a few wilted vegetables, a half-empty bottle of milk, and my medicine on the bottom shelf. It looked abandoned. I turned to Daniel. "Why would you buy your own fridge when this one works fine?" He didn't even look up. "Because we can. And we don't want you touching our things." His words hit me like ice water. Our things. I wanted to say something, to remind him that every spoon, every tile, every piece of furniture in this house came from me, from years of sacrifice, double shifts, missed holidays. But the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I just nodded and sat down. My legs trembled under me. Claire leaned against the counter, her tone soft, but laced with poison. "You should rest, Mrs. Collins. Doctor said stress isn't good for your heart." I looked up sharply. "It's Mom, Claire. You used to call me Mom." She smiled, a small, practiced smile. "Right, of course." I turned my gaze toward the window. Outside, the garden I'd cared for was overgrown, wild. Weeds climbed the fence. My roses were dying. Everything I loved seemed to be fading, just like me. Later that afternoon, I sat alone in the living room, pretending to read, while they whispered in the kitchen. Their voices were low, sharp, like knives being sharpened. "Did she notice?" Claire asked. "She's too tired," Daniel said. "Let her think she's still in charge for now." My stomach twisted. Still in charge? What did that mean? When I walked in, they went silent. Claire smiled sweetly. "Would you like some tea, Mom?" "No," I said quietly. "I'll make my own." Daniel sighed. "Mom, don't start. We just want things to be peaceful." "Peaceful?" I looked at him. "Is that what you call locking me out of my own kitchen?" He avoided my eyes. "You're being dramatic." I wanted to scream, but my voice came out soft. "I almost died, Daniel. I came home expecting my son to care about me, not to claim half my kitchen like a tenant." He said nothing. I turned and walked back to my room. Every step hurt, not just from my healing body, but from the weight of realizing my son wasn't the boy I once knew. As the night fell, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I could hear their laughter from the living room, carefree, distant, like I was just a memory in their house. Then, just as I was drifting off, I heard Daniel's voice through the thin wall. He was on the phone. His tone was low, secretive. "Yeah, she's back," he said. But not for long. My heart stopped. Not for long. I sat up in bed, my pulse racing, fear crawling through me like cold air. Whatever they were planning, it wasn't just about the fridge. Something darker was happening. And I knew. This was only the beginning. The next morning, when I went to make breakfast, I reached for the pantry door, and it wouldn't budge. The knob rattled uselessly in my hand. It was locked, my pantry. For a second I thought maybe it jammed. But when I leaned closer, I saw it clearly. A small, shiny padlock hanging from the latch. Someone had locked it deliberately. My voice cracked as I called out, "Daniel, why is this door locked?" From the living room, his answer came, flat and casual. "We're renovating, Mom. Don't worry about it." "Renovating?" I frowned. "Since when do we renovate the pantry?" He appeared in the doorway, still in his pajamas, holding a cup of coffee like he owned the place. "Relax," he said. "We're managing things differently now." Managing. That word again, like I was some kind of business problem. I crossed my arms. "You can't just lock the pantry." "My things are in there." He sighed, irritated. "You don't need to get upset over everything. Claire keeps things organized now. You'll just get confused." "Confused?" I repeated, my voice shaking. "I've been keeping this house organized since before you were born." He didn't answer. He just walked away, leaving me standing there with the cold morning light spilling across the kitchen floor. I turned back to the stove, trying to focus on making eggs, but something felt deeply wrong. The air itself seemed hostile. Every corner of the house whispered, "You don't belong here anymore." When I sat down at the table, I noticed the small changes. My favorite floral tablecloth was gone, replaced by a sleek gray runner. The family photos that once lined the counter, Daniel's graduation, our trip to the lake, were missing. Even the little ceramic rooster I'd had since my wedding day was gone. It wasn't just the pantry. It was everything. After breakfast, I walked through the living room. The furniture had been rearranged. My armchair pushed into the corner, a new glass coffee table in its place. The walls looked bare, the warmth of our old home replaced by something sterile and cold. "Where are the pictures?" I asked quietly. Claire didn't look up from her phone. "We're redecorating," she said. "We thought we'd make it more modern." We. Always we. I tried to keep calm. "And did you think maybe I'd like to be part of that decision?" She smiled sweetly, her eyes never meeting mine. "You were in the hospital, remember? We didn't want to bother you." Something inside me twisted. She said it kindly, but it was a knife hidden in sugar. I went to the hall closet searching for the old photo albums, but even they were gone. Every trace of my husband, of Daniel's childhood, of my own life here erased. The more I looked, the more I realized how much had changed. The internet password no longer worked. My name was missing from the Wi-Fi network. The bills that usually came in my name, electricity, water, had new ones stacked neatly on the counter. And when I looked closer, I saw it clearly, Daniel Collins. Only his name. My hands trembled as I held the paper. "Why isn't my name on this?" I asked, walking into the living room. Daniel barely glanced at it. "I just switched it over while you were gone. Makes things simpler." "Simple?" I said. "You mean without me?" He rolled his eyes. "Mom, you're overreacting. You should be grateful we're handling things." Grateful. The word stung worse than any slap. I went back to my room and shut the door, my heart pounding. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the phone. My fingers hovered over the contacts before I finally pressed Lila. When her warm voice answered, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "Lila, something's wrong," I whispered. "They've changed everything. Locked the pantry, took my name off the bills." There was a pause. Then she said softly, "Oh dear, that doesn't sound like redecorating. That sounds like they're planning something." My chest tightened. "Planning what?" "I don't know," she said carefully. "But you need to check your accounts. Make sure nothing's missing. Promise me you will." I promised. After we hung up, I sat there, staring at the old family photo I still kept on my nightstand. Daniel at 10 years old, smiling, holding my hand. I tried to remember the last time he'd looked at me like that. I couldn't. When evening came, I made myself tea and went back to the kitchen. The pantry was still locked. Daniel and Claire were watching TV, laughing at something together. They looked like strangers living in my house. I washed my cup slowly, trying not to shake. Something deep inside me whispered that I wasn't just being excluded, I was being pushed out. Later that night, as I passed the study, I heard a faint sound, a soft, rhythmic tearing noise. I peeked through the slightly open door. Claire was sitting at the desk, feeding paper after paper into the shredder. Her face was calm, almost pleased. Curious, I stepped closer, staying silent. When the next paper passed through the blades, I caught a glimpse of the heading. My name. My full name. I froze. Bank statements, with my name on them. She shredded another, then another, each one disappearing forever. My hand covered my mouth to stop the gasp. My heart pounded so loud I was sure she could hear it. That's when I realized this wasn't carelessness. This was preparation. They weren't just taking over the house. They were erasing me. When I opened my bank app that morning, my heart froze. My name, gone. The account I'd shared with my son for over 15 years now only bore his. For a long moment, I just stared at the glowing screen, my fingers trembling. Maybe it was a glitch. Maybe I'd pressed something wrong. But no matter how many times I refreshed, my name never returned. The house was quiet, unnervingly so. Only the twin hums of the 2 refrigerators filled the silence, the one in the kitchen, and the smaller one they'd brought into their bedroom. 2 fridges, 2 lives, 2 worlds in the same house. I sat in the dim light of the living room, surrounded by walls that used to make me feel safe. Now, even the air felt foreign, stripped of the warmth I once knew. When my son Daniel came downstairs, he didn't greet me. He barely looked at me. "Daniel," I said softly, holding up my phone. "My name's missing from the joint account. Did the bank change something?" He glanced at me, then at the phone, his expression calm, too calm. "Mom, relax," he said, reaching for the coffee pot. "We're restructuring things a bit. It's easier for me to handle payments now that you're recovering. The word cut through me, as if I were fragile glass, too weak to question what belonged to me. "But Daniel," I said carefully, "you could have told me." "That's my savings too," he sighed, stirring his coffee with unnecessary force. "Mom, you're not working anymore. It's just bookkeeping. Don't overthink it." Before I could respond, his wife Jenna appeared in the doorway, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. "Maybe you just forgot, dear," she said. "You've been so forgetful lately." My cheeks burned. "I may be old," I said, my tone sharper than intended, "but I'm not senile." Jenna's lips curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She leaned close to Daniel and whispered something I couldn't hear. They both laughed quietly, and she walked away, her slippers dragging against the floor like an insult. That afternoon, as I stepped outside to clear my head, I ran into Mr. Collins, my next-door neighbor. "Did you ever decide to sell?" he asked casually. I blinked. "Sell? Yeah, I saw a for sale sign out front last week. Thought you might be moving." My stomach tightened. "There's no sign now," he frowned. "Oh, guess they took it down. Must have changed their minds." By the time I returned to the house, my hands were shaking. They were selling my home. I waited until they both left that evening before making my move. I wrapped a scarf around my neck, grabbed my old handbag, and called a taxi. The bank was closing soon, but I had to know the truth. The teller recognized me immediately. "Mrs. Whitaker, how are you feeling? We haven't seen you in months." I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "I need to check the ownership on my joint account with my son. Something's not right." She hesitated, then called a manager. A few minutes later, a man in a gray suit led me to his office. He closed the door gently and spoke in a low tone. "Mrs. Whitaker, your son came in last month with documents transferring account ownership. Everything appeared to be in order. It included your signature." I stared at him. "That's impossible. I was in the hospital." He opened a file, sliding the papers toward me. My own name, scrawled at the bottom in shaky handwriting. But it wasn't mine. "That's not my signature," I whispered. "That's not even close." The banker's expression softened. "Ma'am, you may want to contact the authorities. It appears someone may have forged authorization." My hands gripped the table edge to steady myself. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My own son had stolen from me. Not just my money, but my name. By the time I reached home, the sky had turned a bruised purple. I sat in the car for a long time, watching the faint light through the kitchen curtains. My chest ached with anger and disbelief. Inside, I heard voices. Daniel's low, steady tone and Jenna's soft laughter. I crept closer, staying in the shadow of the hallway. "Once the paper's clear," Daniel was saying. "She's moving to the nursing home." I already spoke to the director. My heart stopped. Jenna's voice followed. Quiet, pleased. Good. I can't stand the smell of her cooking anymore. Something inside me broke. I turned away, my breath coming fast, my fingers digging into the wall to stay upright. The woman who once fed and raised them was now just a burden to dispose of. But as the blood roared in my ears, another feeling began to rise beneath the hurt. Cold, focused, burning like iron. If they thought I was too weak to fight back, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. That night, I started recording. Every word, every whisper. The house had turned into a battlefield, and I was done being the victim. While Daniel and Jenna slept upstairs, I moved silently through the rooms, the soft creak of the wooden floorboards echoing under my bare feet. The clock on the wall ticked like a metronome to my heartbeat. I hid a tiny voice recorder behind the photo frame on the mantel, the one that used to hold a family picture of the three of us smiling at the lake. They'd removed the photo weeks ago, replacing it with some modern art print. I slid the recorder in behind the frame, and adjusted it until it looked untouched. Then I went to my bedroom and unlocked the small chest that had belonged to my late husband, Robert. Inside were old papers, insurance forms, and, to my surprise, a sealed envelope labeled Will and Property Documents. My breath caught. My fingers trembled as I unfolded the will. The yellowed paper crackled softly under the dim lamplight. It stated, in my husband's careful handwriting, "The property at 14 Maple Lane shall remain in the sole ownership of my wife, Margaret Whittaker, for as long as she lives." I stared at it, reading the words again and again, as if repetition could make the betrayal less cruel. The house was mine. Only mine. And yet, Daniel had told me the house was joint property now, that things had been restructured. I turned to the next set of papers in the folder and froze. There it was again, my forged signature. On the property transfer documents. Same shaky, uneven writing I'd seen at the bank. He'd copied my name like a stranger imitating a ghost. I pressed my hand over my mouth to stifle the sob that rose in my throat. The edges of my world blurred with rage. They wanted to erase me, but they had underestimated what I was capable of. The next morning, I acted as though nothing had changed. I smiled when Jenna handed me burnt toast and pretended not to notice her eyes flicking toward my phone on the counter. She was watching me now, paranoid, suspicious. Every time I left a room, I could feel her presence behind me, hovering like a shadow. Once I caught her scrolling through my messages when she thought I wasn't looking. "You shouldn't touch my phone without asking," I said quietly. She gave a thin smile. "Just checking the Wi-Fi, dear. You always forget the password." I smiled back. Not anymore. That night, after they'd gone to bed, I slipped into the study. The room smelled of coffee and printer ink. On Daniel's desk sat a neat stack of papers, some financial statements, a printed email from a real estate agent, and a note scribbled in his handwriting. Offer, $650,000. Finalize once title clears. My vision blurred. He was selling the house, my house, behind my back. I took photos of everything with my old flip phone, the one Jenna didn't know existed. Then I tucked the papers back exactly as I'd found them and closed the door without a sound. The next morning, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Thomas Gray, Robert's old lawyer and our family friend. He answered on the second ring. "Margaret? Good heavens, it's been ages. How are you?" "I need your help, Thomas," I whispered. "Something's happening with my son." "Something illegal?" There was a pause. Then his voice softened. "Tell me everything." I explained everything. The forged signature, the missing account name, the secret sale. My voice shook, but his tone remained calm, measured. "Don't confront them yet," he said finally. "Let them hang themselves. Collect everything, proof, documents, recordings. I'll prepare the case quietly." After the call ended, I looked at my reflection in the mirror beside the hallway. My face was pale, my eyes lined with exhaustion, but beneath the tiredness, something new flickered. "Strength. You'll regret crossing me," I whispered to my reflection. "You both will." Over the next few days, I became a ghost in my own home. I hid cameras behind curtains, inside the bookshelf, even beneath the vent near the kitchen table. Every conversation, every whisper I recorded. I learned to smile while they plotted. I listened to them discuss offers, timelines, excuses to the neighbors. Once I heard Jenna giggle and say, "She'll be gone before the month ends." They didn't know I was listening. One night, after they'd gone to bed, I sat in the living room, replaying the day's recordings on my laptop. The house was dark, except for the flickering light of the screen. Most of it was meaningless chatter, dishes clinking, footsteps, Daniel's voice complaining about work. But then, something caught my ear, the sound of the front door unlocking. Footsteps, Daniel's voice, low, cautious. "Here are the keys," he said. "Just make sure the sign doesn't go up again until the paperwork clears." Another voice replied, a man's voice, unfamiliar, polite. "Understood. I'll handle everything discreetly." My heart began to pound. I skipped the playback back a few seconds, turning up the volume. It was clear. Daniel was meeting a real estate agent, in my house, and handing over the keys. The betrayal was no longer just suspicion. It was proof. I sat back in the dark, the soft whir of the laptop fan filling the silence. My hands were steady now, my fear gone. They thought I was powerless, but I had everything I needed to destroy them, and they didn't even know it yet. I invited them for dinner. My son, his wife, and their secrets. The dining room looked warm and peaceful, but I could feel the tension pulsing under the candlelight. The polished silverware, the folded napkins, the gentle flicker of the flames. It was all part of my stage. The fridge hummed behind me, steady and low, like a warning. "Smells good, Mom," Daniel said, forcing a smile as he pulled out a chair. Jenna followed him, wearing a silk blouse far too fine for an ordinary evening. She looked at the table like it was a trap she couldn't quite see yet. "I thought we could celebrate," I said softly, placing the roasted chicken on the table. "It's been an eventful few weeks." Jenna's fork clinked against her plate. "Celebrate what exactly?" "Our family," I replied, "and maybe new beginnings." The silence stretched. I poured wine for each of us, my hands steady, my voice calm. They believed I was still fragile, recovering, harmless, but I could see the flicker of unease already beginning behind Daniel's eyes. We started eating, small talk filling the air. Work, weather, trivial things. I let them talk, pretending to listen, nodding at the right moments. Then halfway through the meal, I set my fork down and leaned back in my chair. "You know," I began lightly, "I was going through some old papers the other day. Your father was always so meticulous. His will, for instance, still perfectly preserved." The air shifted. Jenna froze mid-bite, her fork hovering inches from her mouth. Daniel's shoulders tensed. "What will?" he asked flatly. "The one that says this house belongs solely to me," I said, watching his expression. "I found it while cleaning." Such comforting words, knowing Robert made sure I'd always have a home. Daniel's fork hit his plate with a sharp clang. "That old paper doesn't mean anything now," he snapped. "Doesn't it?" I tilted my head. "Because according to the law, it means quite a lot." Jenna reached for her wine glass, but her hand trembled. "You're mistaken, Margaret. Things have changed since then. We've updated some of the paperwork." "Oh, I'm aware," I said, my voice quiet but cutting. "I've seen the updated paperwork. The ones with my forged signature." Her eyes widened. "What are you talking about? You think I was too sick to notice?" I leaned forward, my voice hardening. "You underestimated me." Daniel's face went pale. "Mom, you don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly." I rose from my chair and walked toward the TV in the corner of the room. "I understand greed. I understand betrayal. But most of all, I understand what happens when people think a woman like me has no fight left." I pressed play. On the screen, the hidden camera footage flickered to life. Daniel at the front door, handing keys to a man in a suit. The agent's voice was clear. "Understood. I'll handle everything discreetly." Daniel shot up from his chair. "Where did you get that?" "I told you," I said, turning to face him. "You underestimated me." "Mom, this isn't what it looks like." His voice cracked, desperate now. "We were just securing our future. That's all." "You wouldn't understand. I wouldn't understand." I stepped closer, my tone steady. "I gave up my future for you. Every savings account, every plan, every dream. It went into raising you. Into this house. And this is how you repay me." He looked at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. Jenna finally spoke, her voice sharp and defensive. "We were doing what was best for everyone. You can't live here alone forever. You're getting older, you need care." "Care?" I cut her off. "Locking my pantry, stealing my money, selling my home, that's care?" The color drained from her face. The only sound left was the hum of the fridge. Daniel tried to speak again, but I raised my hand. "Stop, just stop." "You've said enough." He sank back into his chair, defeated, his jaw tight. "You were my son," I whispered, tears finally escaping. "The only person I thought I could trust. But somewhere along the way, you started seeing me as a burden instead of your mother." For a long moment, no one moved. The flickering candlelight danced across their faces. Guilt, fear, regret. Then came a sound that broke the silence. A knock at the door. 3 sharp, steady knocks. Daniel turned, startled. "Who's that?" I walked toward the door, my steps calm, deliberate. "You'll see." When I opened it, 2 police officers stood outside, their badges glinting in the light. Behind them stood Thomas, my lawyer, holding a folder in his hand. "Mrs. Whitaker," the officer said politely. "We're here regarding a report of property fraud." I stepped aside, my voice soft but unwavering. "Yes, officers. Please come in." As they entered, Daniel's voice broke behind me, a panicked whisper, trembling with disbelief. "Mom, what did you do?" I didn't turn back. I only said what I had to. And as the door closed, I heard the fridge hum again, steady, cold, final. As the officers walked in, my son's face went pale, colder than the new fridge he claimed was his. The flashing red and blue lights outside bled through the curtains, painting the living room in a surreal glow. The air was thick, heavy with the smell of fear and candle wax. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't the one trembling. "Daniel Whitaker?" the taller officer said, stepping forward. "We need to ask you some questions regarding a property transfer and alleged forgery." Daniel's mouth opened, but no words came out. Jenna clutched his arm, her eyes darting wildly from me to the officers. "There must be a mistake," she stammered. This is a misunderstanding." My lawyer, Thomas, set a folder down on the table, the same table where, minutes ago, we had shared dinner like a family. "No mistake," he said firmly. "Mrs. Whitaker's husband's will clearly states the house remains solely in her name. The signatures on the recent documents don't match hers. The bank verified the discrepancies this afternoon." I watched Daniel's jaw clench. His voice came out low and shaky. "I was just trying to make life easier for us. You don't know how hard it's been, Mom." I cut him off, my tone calm but razor sharp. "By stealing mine?" He flinched. The shorter officer stepped closer. "Sir, we've also confirmed your name on several utility accounts that were changed without the owner's consent. We'll need you to come with us for questioning." Jenna's voice rose, panicked. Wait! I didn't do anything. It was all him. He told me it was just paperwork, that his mother approved." Her words tumbled out like stones, heavy and desperate. Daniel turned on her, his composure snapping. "Don't you dare, Jenna. You were the one who pushed for this. You said selling the house would solve everything." "Enough!" I said, my voice echoing through the room. They both froze. The candles flickered as if even the air itself held its breath. I looked at them, my son and his wife, two people who had turned my home into a battlefield. My heart ached, but not with weakness anymore. With finality. "You did this to yourself," I said quietly. Daniel shook his head, tears brimming in his eyes. "Mom, please, don't let them take me. I just wanted to make sure you were cared for." "You were sick alone?" "Alone?" I whispered. "You made me alone." He tried to reach for my hand, but I stepped back. The officer moved between us. "Sir, please stand up." Jenna backed away, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I thought she wouldn't come back from the hospital." Her words hit like ice water. I stared at her, unable to speak. Thomas broke the silence. "Mrs. Whitaker, everything is in order. Once the police finish, we'll file to restore all ownership documents. Your rights are fully protected." I nodded, my throat tight but steady. "Thank you, Thomas." Daniel was being cuffed now, his voice breaking as he called out, "Mom, please don't do this to me." I didn't answer. I couldn't. The officers guided him toward the door. Jenna stood motionless, watching him go, then turned to me, her mascara streaking down her face. "You ruined everything," she hissed. I looked her straight in the eyes. "No, Jenna, I fixed everything." The door shut behind them. Silence settled again. Deep, pure, cleansing. For a moment I just stood there, breathing in the quiet. My hands no longer shook. The house, my house, finally felt still again. Thomas gathered the documents into his briefcase. "You were brave, Margaret," he said gently. "Most people wouldn't have had the strength to handle this alone." I gave him a small smile. I wasn't alone. I had truth on my side. He nodded and left me to my peace. When the last sound of footsteps faded, I turned toward the kitchen. The twin fridges stood side by side, one full, one empty. The new one gleamed cold and arrogant, as if mocking me. I opened it slowly. Inside were their things. Fancy desserts, imported cheese, wine bottles. Every shelf spoke of indulgence bought with deceit. One by one, I began taking them out. Each item landed in the trash with a soft, satisfying thud. I worked silently, methodically, until the fridge stood completely bare. Then I stepped back and whispered, "My kitchen. My rules." The old fridge hummed quietly beside it, loyal and familiar. As I closed the empty door, I felt something ease inside me, a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. Justice didn't always come with noise or drama. Sometimes it arrived like this, quietly, coldly, with the steady hum of a fridge and the calm breath of a woman who refused to be erased. I wiped my hands, looked around the kitchen, and smiled faintly. "Welcome home, Margaret," I murmured to myself. Outside, the night settled, peaceful and still. The flashing lights faded into the distance, and for the first time in a long while, I sat down at my own table, poured myself a cup of tea, and let the warmth sink in. The storm had passed. The house, and my dignity, were mine again. Thanks for listening. If you've ever been underestimated, remember, silence can be your sharpest weapon. Don't forget to subscribe and share your story. Weeks later, the house finally felt like mine again. Quiet, but honest. The echo of footsteps that once stomped through my halls had been replaced by the soft hum of peace. Sunlight streamed through clean windows, landing gently on the new fridge that stood like a silent witness to everything that had happened. For the first time in months, I could breathe. No shouting, no tension, No manipulation dressed as love. Just me, and the quiet rhythm of a home finally at rest. Every morning I brewed my coffee, sat by the kitchen table, and watched the light crawl across the floor. The fridge hummed softly in the background, not just an appliance, but a reminder. It was mine. Every inch of this home, every scar in its walls, belonged to me again. Still, peace didn't come without echoes. The phone rang often, neighbors checking in. Some of them were curious, others pretending to care. "We heard about your son," they'd say with that tone, half pity, half gossip. I'd just smile and tell them I was doing fine. But at night, when the world quieted down, the memories crept in. His face when the police arrived, the pleading in his voice, the look of betrayal that mirrored my own. One afternoon, a letter arrived. The return address was the county jail. My hands trembled as I opened it. "Mom," it began, "I know you probably hate me. I didn't mean for things to go this far. I just wanted a better life for us. Please forgive me. I miss you." The words were clumsy, uneven, as if guilt itself had tried to hold the pen. For a long time I just stared at it. The mother in me wanted to cry. The woman in me, the one who had been broken and rebuilt, simply folded the letter carefully. Then slowly I tore it in half, then again, and again, until all that was left were soft, fluttering pieces in the waste bin, like snow that melted before it touched the ground. It wasn't bitterness. It was release. That same week, I began volunteering at the community center downtown. They were starting a new program for seniors, teaching them about property rights, wills, and financial safety. "You'd be perfect for this," the director said. Maybe I was. Each time I sat across from someone's trembling hands or saw fear in their eyes, I saw a reflection of myself, the woman who once believed that love excused betrayal. And each time I explained a legal paper, each time I told them, "You have a right to protect what's yours," I felt lighter, stronger. One morning, I went outside with a trowel and a pack of flower seeds. The spot where my son used to park his car was just bare earth now, still scarred from tire marks. I dug into the soil, feeling the cool earth between my fingers. As I planted the flowers, I whispered, "This is mine again." Days passed. Then weeks. The flowers began to bloom, bright and defiant, like little flags of victory. Inside, the kitchen gleamed. Everything was simple now. A single plate, a clean tablecloth, and the fridge quietly humming in the corner. I stood before it one evening, remembering all the chaos it had witnessed, the lies, the shouting, the cold betrayal. And now, just silence. "Some things can be replaced," I said softly, running my hand across the cool metal door. "But not trust." I smiled, not with sadness, but with understanding. The sun dipped behind the trees, painting the walls in soft gold. I opened the fridge to grab some milk, and froze. There, taped to the inside of the door, was a small note. My own handwriting. I had written it days after everything ended, but somehow I'd forgotten. It said, simply, "Never again." The words hit me harder than I expected. They weren't bitter. They were a promise. A vow not just against betrayal, but against losing myself again. I stood there for a long time, listening to the quiet hum of the fridge, feeling my heart finally steady. The house wasn't empty anymore. It was full, of peace, of lessons, of strength, and for the first time, truly, completely, I felt at home. They thought they could erase me, but I was stronger than their greed. The words came to me one quiet afternoon, as I sat by the kitchen window, a cup of tea steaming beside a stack of blank paper. Outside, the garden was in bloom. The same patch of earth that had once been scarred by my son's tires was now alive with color. Renewal, I thought. That's what this was. For a long while, I stared at the empty page. Memories flickered like old film. His lies, her manipulation, the look of shock when justice arrived. I could still hear their voices, trembling with excuses, but now they no longer hurt. They were simply echoes, faint reminders of what I survived. So I began to write. Not for revenge, not for pity, but for truth. For others like me who once stayed quiet, believing that family was reason enough to endure disrespect. "My name doesn't matter," I wrote. "What matters is that betrayal doesn't end blood. It ends blindness." Each sentence flowed with a strange calm. I wrote about the warnings I ignored, the guilt I carried, the strength I found when silence broke. The words were not angry. They were steady, deliberate, like the heartbeat of a woman who had finally remembered her worth. When the letter was done, I placed it in an envelope, not addressed to anyone in particular. Then, on impulse, I opened my laptop. The cursor blinked on an empty post box, the start of something new. I began recording. My voice was steady, almost soft, but every word carried the weight of truth. If your children treat you like a burden, I said, looking straight into the camera, remind them who built their world, who wiped their tears, who gave them everything they now take for granted. I paused, letting the silence breathe. Strength doesn't begin when the pain ends, I continued quietly. It begins when you stop being afraid to speak. By the time I finished, tears had found their way down my cheeks. Not from sadness, but from relief. I hit upload. The story was out there now, free from the confines of my heart. Later that evening, as the light faded, I returned to the kitchen. The tea had gone cold, but the peace in the room was warm. The fridge hummed its familiar tune, steady, constant, loyal. I ran my fingers along its cool surface, remembering the chaos it had once witnessed, the shouting, the lies, the heartbreak. And yet, it stood there still, clean and quiet, just like me. I smiled. The fridge is just metal, I murmured almost to myself. But dignity? I opened the door, the soft light spilling over me. That stays cold only until you warm it with truth. The hum continued, steady as a heartbeat, a sound of life moving on. I closed the door gently, poured myself a fresh cup of tea, and sat down to watch the sunset. The past no longer haunted me. It had taught me. And in that quiet kitchen, with truth finally spoken and peace finally mine, I was home. Call to action. If you believe that justice and self-respect always win in the end, subscribe, share, and remind someone today that silence never protects the truth. And let this story give strength to those who forgot how powerful they really are.